Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 8 of the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff that I have no clue about, but we're going to talk about it nonetheless. So stick around.
Three, two, one. This is the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action podcast.
We believe there's no defensive situation so bad that your lack of training can make it worse. We're on a mission to cut the crap in the firearms industry and bring you topics and discussions that are designed to make you a more informed and effective gunfighter. If it has to do with alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and everything else, we're going to talk about it. Guys, gals, and submarine racers, here are your hosts, Jay Eisenicke and Mike Garza. Well, all right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action podcast. I just dig that intro music, man. It's just groovy. I'm glad I picked it.
I like the low bass that comes with it. I need to just get bigger speakers, like 18s, get a woofer low pass system.
That'd be good. That's a good idea. Man. Yeah. Hey, I would appreciate everybody tuning in, and just a bit of a reminder is, if you have a comment or question, on this show or any of the other ones, make sure in the comments, whenever we post these up, throw some comments into the comments section, or if you got a question or comment and you just want to send us an email, shoot an email to podcast@latentforce.com. But, before we get started, Mike, I wanted to let you know that if you remember back a few episodes ago, we were talking about the Dragon capsule and how it docked at the International Space Station, and you missed it all. It was history making, and you missed it because you were hungover or something, I think is what you told me. You remember that?
All I learned was don't open the door in space. That's what I remember.
Exactly. And always leave the screen door closed.
That's right.
Rule number 1 of space travel. So I was cruising around on Netflix.
Don't they teach you that in Space Force, though?
Wow. Now you've stolen my thunder. So I was on Netflix and I stumbled upon what Netflix is trying to sell as the new Office, but in space, which is Space Force, the series with Stephen Carell.
Get out of here.
Yeah, they have a series.
No.
Seriously. Yes. And so I was immediately thinking of our conversation about Space Force and the onesies. And I just got done watching an episode about how the FLOTUS, First Lady of the United States, was helping them design these new uniforms for Space Force. And they didn't really want her to be involved, but she was. Any rate, if you haven't watched it, Stephen Carell plays this 4-star general, and then John Malkovich plays this eccentric scientist, is like a scientist guy that's part of it. And Stephen Carell and this group of people are tasked with establishing the 6th branch of the military, Space Force. And it's kind of fun in a certain way, but it's really pretty stupid. I don't think I'm going to make it through to the end, but they really poke fun at the current Trump administration. And they even have this lady in it that is, you know who they're trying to make her out to be is that AOC from New York, whatever her name is. I don't even know what her name is. Yeah. Her. And she's on Squeaky Girl and talking about this and, and everything costs too much and all that kind of stuff. Anyways, she's in this whole thing. And so I just thought I would share, if you haven't seen it, and it's a bit disappointing because they don't have onesies. Sorry.
Well, but not everything's correct from Hollywood.
But they do. They do have a monkey up there that I think that they forgot was in space, and he got hungry and it ate its companion, which was like a dog or something like that. So there were some humorous parts. I don't know if it has the steam to make it all the way through. I don't know. But anyway. So this is not Rotten Tomatoes. We're not here to talk about shows on Netflix, but I just thought I'd tell you about it so you can check it out. It's called Space Force.
Yeah, see, we're going to have a problem there because I hate Netflix. I hate just about everything on the TV nowadays.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand. Well, the good thing is, though, is that it gives us a great transition from Space Force to Force Continuum, which is kind of what we're going to talk about. So, I don't. Maybe it was, maybe it was planned. I don't know. Could it be just a coincidence? Maybe. But at any rate, so I thought we would go into talking about something right now. Obviously, everything that's going on in the world, in society, is everybody has lost their mind right at this point. And I just caught myself is I just said and I'm just going to remind everybody is that we are not professionals. We barely play professionals on TV, so occasionally I'm going to say So cut me some slack. And apparently, I say apparently a lot.
That's baloney. I am perfect.
Okay. All right. Apparently you are. That's what I've heard. So, at any rate, the current environment, and one of the things that, Mike and I had talked about was we didn't really want to get into making this a heavy politics podcast because it's real easy to do that. And, let's be honest, there's plenty of people that do that. But, we got to talk about certain things that are current and how it impacts everybody because it does impact us in some way or another. So I don't want to get too far down the whole thing, but I think it's important and is to discuss because I think that most people that are going to be listening to this podcast probably share the same perspective that we do. But I question whether everybody's going to have all the information. And so I think it's our service is to try to give everybody the information and let them figure it out for themselves. But I shared with you this morning was not an episode, excuse me. I'm already back on Space Force. I shared with you a video that was of a shooting in Washington, D.C. It was one of the suburbs. And now, as well as I do, is that D.C. has probably some of the worst gun laws. Next to California, they've got to have some of the worst gun laws. So the last place we're going to figure, because after all, gun control works and we know that it reduces crime. And so
just put up a sign. That's all you need to do.
That's all you got to do. That's all it takes. Just put a sign up with a little circle with a gun and a red line through it. And that's all it takes. And everybody will be happy. So it was a video caught on somebody's Ring camera on their front door, and it lasted for like a minute and a half. And it was a complete, total, just gunfight down the street. And I was shocked to see, but there were a lot of interesting things to see in it. So it lasted about a minute and a half. You have seen, we'll put it in the show notes so you can watch the video. You probably have seen it by the time this comes up, but there's a lot of things to learn about this thing. And what was interesting is that when all this gunfire is going on, nobody really, there were a handful of people that ran, but if you really pay attention to the video, and it goes back to the training about paying attention to your surroundings and why it's so important to know what is, your target and beyond, what's between you and the target and beyond and around it, is because these people are just running around in circles. Gunfire is going and these people don't know where to go and they're here and they're there and people are just walking in and out of people's line of fire. It was crazy.
I think the adjective you want there is Charlie Foxtrot. I had to catch myself because I was almost like...
Yeah. And everybody's over here feverishly Googling, what does Charlie Foxtrot stand for?
No, well, it's another pretty smart.
It's a kind of cluster bomb. And it's
a bunch of ducks, according to my iPhone.
Exactly. Yes. So and it was just, they're just running around. But what was crazy to me is that I don't know if you remember seeing it, is that these guys just pull these guns. It must have been like a Tech 9. Is that what those things are called?
Yeah, I think so.
Just a piece of crap thing, but they pull it out of the back of the car, and the one dude's just standing up, and just, firing. Just, I don't know. It was just crazy that this is going on in somebody's street.
Hey, I'll have to give them props for one thing. They were pulling guns out of everywhere. It's like they have a stash. You know, one guy's in the back of the car. He's got his mag there. I mean, I was pretty impressed on the amount of hiding spots those guys had. I'm surprised they didn't like push a button in the grass and the bush would pop up and give him his Tech 9. I mean,
that's true. Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
And then as all this firing is going and you slowly hear the sirens come into the picture, then all of a sudden everybody just starts hiding all their guns. And I don't even know who got hit. I don't know. It said it appeared that somebody got hit. I don't know. But it was just crazy to see that. And then they're hiding their guns in the back seat of this car. And then the guy's checking to make sure all of his mags are gone. He doesn't have anything on him and he's stuck. And then they just walk casually down the street and then the cops roll up.
Well, we call them mags. They, I'm sure, call them clips.
Yes, they do. Because they're shooting M1s. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
They're in suburban DC. They're shooting M1s. That's what it is.
I'm surprised they didn't put the bayonets on and just go at it.
Yeah, exactly. So it gets back to this whole thing about defunding the police. And you know, one of the things that is the basis of this whole thing, right, is, you know, it all started. I think we've lost sight of what the original issue was, I think, with the Floyd incident. And I think that people have to understand is there's a force continuum, and that is what most agencies are. Well, actually, I'm not going to say most, all of them are going to have a use of force policy, and it's going to be designed around a force continuum some way or some fashion is going to be around there. So some of it is, and I don't think most people know that even exists. What do you think?
I don't know. With the stuff that's going on nowadays, I've heard a couple of agencies say it. Whether they know what it means or not is probably a different story. Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right. And so every year, whenever we did judgmental use of force at the academy or anything like that, everybody had to read through the use of force policy. They had to understand it if they had any questions before we would go into the Milo and they do their testing. So, you know, you're at least going to get that review, and then if it changes, there you have to go in and, you know, take the little quiz on use of force. But I don't think most people generally as the public know that what it is. And so use of force covers a lot of things. So I thought, you know, heck, this might be a good opportunity to just kind of share what it is. And so people have some understanding about how police are moving through this continuum, and you can go up and down and you can jump steps. You can do all those things based on the situation. So the first thing is that most people don't even realize is that these are designed to respond with a level of force that obviously is appropriate with the situation, right? Is we're going to use some level of force that's equal to based on the situation. So how they have it set up, it's pretty makes a lot of sense. Is the first thing is going to be officer presence. So that's going to be what, Mike?
Well, you're not going to be like, "Hey, sir, can you please come and talk to me?" Well, I think the scene that comes to mind is the police academy with the small little black girl, and she's got the very soft, shiny little voice, and then all of a sudden they tell her, you know, "Hey, you gotta, where's your officer presence?" You know, and then all of a sudden she bellows out, you know, "Please stop!" And then all of a sudden it's good.
Right. And so the presence, just presence in itself, is a level of force. Right, is that you are there, they know you're there, but no force per se is used, right? It's just the fact that you're there, people know, people act different. That's like when you're driving down the street and there's a police car parked on the side of the road, everybody, you know, slams on the brakes, does a brake check because they think they're speeding. So right. That is a use of force. It's just the presence. That's the way people are going to think. And whether it's you standing there, a car there, whatever it might be. So the next one is verbalization. And that's where you're giving commands, you're telling people what they need to be doing. They're going to give non-threatening commands. I'm really good with air quotes, non-threatening commands, right? So let me see. Yeah. So somebody's going to come up to if they come up to your car and they say, "Hey, I'm going to need you to see your license and registration." That's the type of stuff. And then obviously, depending on the situation, it either gets more stern and loud or whatever, depending on those things. So that is a use of force also. Then there's empty hand control, which is where you're going to use some sort of force, physical force, bodily force to gain control of the situation. So, when we're talking about that type of stuff, empty hand is going to be, you're just going to, you're going to grab somebody. This is where you see somebody, grab them by the wrist, by the elbow, you twist their hand, you put their hand behind their back, those type of things, just to get somebody, or you may just grab them by the underneath the armpit and by the elbow, and just to guide somebody to somewhere else out of a situation. That's just going to be a level of force, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just empty hand control.
Yep, exactly. Then you're going to have less lethal. And that's going to be any of the technology that they have in order to do that, which could be tasers, it could be, rubber bullets, less lethal shotguns that are shooting beanbag rounds, any of that type of stuff that you might use that is not going to be lethal. So it could be, what else? A lot of them. Go ahead.
And let me say something here, since we're talking about tasers. Maybe the DA for Atlanta is listening in. Less lethal. That means that the taser will not kill you unless you tase somebody out of a tree or they're swimming or what have you. So just in case he's wondering, because I guess that guy is just I can't say it, I guess, but that guy's just he's crazy. One week he says that they're lethal weapons, and then the next they're not lethal. So he needs to make up his mind and set a boundary of clarity there.
Right, exactly. So less lethal then would be anything like we were talking about, beanbag rounds, chemical agents, so like pepper spray, any of that type of stuff that you might use. And then obviously it goes to the what they call as CEDs, which are basically the conducted energy devices, which is a taser, anything that interrupts your electrical pulses throughout your body and to immobilize you. And so that's what it's a taser. It's just, they can't, most people aren't going to put a brand name, but taser is what we all know. Yeah. And then the next step from that, go ahead.
And I don't know if you said batons too.
No, I didn't, but that was, that's what you'd use, like a blunt impact would be like a baton or something like that. And it's interesting because it seems like more, you're seeing less and less of the batons. I don't know, man. If
I loved my baton. I would, every chance I get, I'd crank that thing out.
It's one of those things. I mean, it works used properly, all those type of things. And, there's a lot of uses for it in the, just in the day to day out there, whether it's breaking windows or whatever you might need to do. So there's, I don't know why they'd be getting rid of them, but it seems like they're losing favor. So then obviously after less lethal, you go to lethal force, which is you're going to use a lethal weapon to gain control of the situation. And obviously the stipulation, right, is that you're only gonna use it if that person, the suspect, poses a serious threat to the officer or to another individual, right? And so that's where deadly force is going to come from.
Yep, and taking a taser barb to the eyeball qualifies.
I would think, yeah. Right. I mean, there's a lot of those things because yes, I'll go ahead and say, all right, maybe the taser itself, but if he's able to tase the officer who then is incapacitated because he can't do anything, because if you've taken a ride, I know I have, I'm pretty sure you, Mike, took a ride
several times.
You can't do anything. You are incapacitated. That's what it does. And he would then have the advantage over that officer because he's incapacitated for 5 seconds, to where he would be able to grab his gun. Maybe he has a knife, whatever, and he would be able to take it to that officer on the ground while he's being tased. And so you can't say that just because that taser is not the totality of that situation, that leads to a potentially a life-threatening situation for that officer, no doubt. And that's what the point that it is lost.
Yeah, listen, assault is assault, okay? Again, do you really want a taser barb in your eyeball, most likely damaging your eye for the rest of your life? You can't see it, you can't do your job? I mean, come on, folks. It doesn't get any clearer than that. It's absolutely ridiculous that this is even part of a conversation.
Yeah, no, I hear you. But it's kind of like the current environment, though, right? Is that we're in this, it seems like now we have all this anarchy and this mob mentality that's all based simply around this whole spur of the moment. It's what feels good right now type of situation, which is, they're all defund the police. And I thought this would be a good time to kind of talk about some of the stuff that has to do with why this just doesn't make any sense. So give somebody a good discussion about, because it seems like nobody wants to discuss anything. They just want to yell at everybody and just, go over the top about everything. But, to have a discussion is good to have the information. So has to do with, to me, is the talk is we always hear about, especially when it comes with knife fights, right? Is that, why would you shoot a guy? He only had a knife. And I think we talked about this before, is that a blade has killed millions and millions and millions of people in the thousands of years that we've had blades. They're effective. They kill people. We don't need to prove that they can. So a knife, no matter what, is capable of taking another person's life. So it's a deadly weapon, just like a gun. Just because I only have to be within arm's length to use it instead of at distance doesn't change the fact that it's a lethal weapon, right?
Absolutely.
So everybody, you hear the media, that's their whole thing is, well, if we just talk to them in a nice voice, and another in air quotes, right, is de-escalation. We've all heard that, right? And they like to use that as that we need to give better de-escalation techniques and blah, 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 blah. So I just, it seems to me is that they actually believe, people, the media, believe that if we just talk nice to people, that they're going to stop doing what they're doing.
You mean that doesn't work? I don't understand. I used to talk nice to people all the time while on shift, and it's amazing how many times I used to have to get in a scuffle after talking nice to them.
I don't get it, and it's like you don't even, I don't know. It's just frustrating because it doesn't matter how nicely you approach people, is that they always, I shouldn't say always, but there's a good percentage of people that are just going to argue with you, are going to be confrontational no matter what, no matter how nice it is that you talk to them. It just doesn't matter. And
the Atlanta case is a perfect example. Go back and watch the 40-minute video from the cop. The guy is asleep at a Wendy's drive-thru. Folks, let me tell you something. If you get in my way of my double cheeseburger sandwich and you're drunk asleep at the drive-thru, you won't have to worry about the cops. I'm going to run you over. I'm going to push you out of the way, and I'm going to hope that you're going over the cliff. Those cops were so nice. Number one, they're like, sir, are you okay? We want to make sure you're okay. Like, they were completely chill. And so was the guy. Once they woke him up, right? He was actually nice. And then all of a sudden, just a flip, man. It was like a light switch. And then all of a sudden it's on, and he's committed felonies right off the bat.
Well, and that's the thing that people don't understand is that, I did the DUI task force for a while. And the one thing that you realize even when you go to domestics is that when alcohol is involved, is that people it just snaps just like that.
Drugs in general.
Yeah. And so you could go and this guy could be nice as pie, and it could be 30 seconds later, you could not even say anything that would offend anyone ever, and they take offense to it. And that's why usually when you get somebody when you get an officer that is doing a roadside sobriety test, most places are going to have somebody backing them up, because things happen so fast, because they're unpredictable, especially when, they're drunk or they're under the influence of drugs. So, you can just expect that that's going to happen. It's never going to go easy when somebody's intoxicated or under the influence of drugs. So I don't know. But those are the things that you just talking to them nicely. Yes. Maybe if you're sober, yes, that probably works most of the time. But when the people that we're talking about, where it gets to that point, is they're usually not sober. They're going to be under the influence of something, whether it might even be the influence of a mental health disorder or drugs or something. So, but I went in and I said, all right, I've been spending a lot of time surfing around on the net and doing some research on stuff. So I went to the Department of Justice website and I said, what is their definition of de-escalation? So I checked it out, typed it in, and it says the strategic slowing down of an incident in a manner that allows officers more time, distance, space, and tactical flexibility during a dynamic situation on the street.
Now I have a question for you.
Sure.
You remember all that training we did?
No,
I don't remember any of what you just said in any of that training that we got.
Right.
But I have an idea. Let's take away more money. That makes total sense.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it's, you have to go way back into this thing, but I mean, that's the whole deal is so if you just listen to what that said is, so go ahead and I challenge anybody to give me a way to measure or have a good understanding of what I just read. I mean, so what is a strategic slowing down of an incident? What is that exactly? What does it look like? How do you know that that's actually happening? I
think Bill and Ted did it.
Are you talking? Which Bill and Ted are you talking about?
Oh, I don't know. I've only seen the first one, so.
Oh, okay, all right. Their Excellent Adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the problem, right? And then it turns into is that everybody's different. You're different. Your experiences. We were talking about this before we even started recording. Is that your experiences in life and the things that you were talking about in the last episode about the 2 robberies that you had. So your experiences with those people and those situations is going to be different than mine. And so how we approach things and what we see and how people act are going to be totally different, right? And so there's no 2 ways that we can train or teach people that this is how it works because it's based so much on our personal lives and what we've done and experienced to apply
our perception. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the biggest thing that we need to do is, in my opinion, is we've got to provide training for everybody to be thinking the same way and looking at how all of this stuff works. If we're trying to actually truly get people to being safe and saving lives, whether it's officers' lives or criminals or people that are innocent that are become in the middle of this, is the training is going to be the key part to this. So yeah, training is a great idea. And obviously that's what we would want to do. But I think, so what does a training look like? So we talk about is, we've done the force on force training with UTM, which is the man marking rounds where you go in and it's set up and it's force on force. You both have marking guns and you go into those situations where now it's force on force. You have to determine whether you're going to draw your gun. There's plenty of videos out there of people that say the police don't know what they're doing and they just go to their gun all the time. And they put these civilians into the situation with the gun with other people. And they all of a sudden their eyes just open up. And there was that guy in Phoenix, he was a big
pastor.
Yeah, he's a pastor, big anti-cop guy. And they said, hey, why don't you come down and do the training? And he went through that training and his eyes were open to realize how fast things happen. And when we talk about this continuum, this force continuum, things go from just your presence can go to less lethal, and it can go from less lethal to lethal in just seconds or half seconds, split seconds, right? And so that's what they were realizing. So the more we can get people trained to have to use their experiences in their lives into real life force on force scenarios, instead of sitting in classrooms listening to a PowerPoint presentation, the sooner we have people doing that, the better we're going to be. And that's what's going to save lives. But here's the problem, right? What's going to be the problem, Mike?
I don't know. You tell me. I really wasn't listening.
Oh, geez.
I was thinking of a story that I want to tell.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So the one guy that I'm hoping is listening to me isn't listening to me. So I hope somebody else out there is listening. But no, I mean, seriously, it's training equals money.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Right. And so money means you have to have it budgeted and you have to have money set aside. Training takes time and it takes people. And if you have 500 officers on your force and it takes 8 hours to train those people or 16 hours to train those people, and we're talking times 500 officers, I mean, that's a lot of time. That's 1,000 days. That is, if there's only 2,080 hours in a year, I mean, it's going to take you 3 years to train all of them. Yeah. And that's a lot of money.
And, I'll follow it up with this. I'm currently trying to figure out how many NYPD cops there are. But here's another thing. Money is one aspect of it, right? This is what I had seen when I was in the office. Complacency and sheer boredom So these firearms instructors that are out there, they're like, today I have to go to the range and I've got to be out there all day and I've got to train a bunch of noobs to use a gun. Like that was literally their entire 40-hour work week. They had zero passion for it. So the problem is, number one, you have to deal with the politics inside the office, and then you had to go and do this, and you want to do it a certain way because you knew there was value in the way you were doing it versus the way the office dictates, from behind a desk, right? We used to call that troubleshooting from behind a desk. So I'll give you a quick war story. We had a shoot house there. I was tasked, I should say, by a sergeant from a district that, hey, we always do this training, and the guys already know. We have 8 volunteers that come in, they run a scenario, and then they already know once the 8 guys leave the party, right? We were doing an active shooter at a house. Once these 8 guys leave, they already know, oh, that was 8 volunteers. So now the only person left in the house is a bad guy. Well, because I'm a jerk, I had those volunteers, once they left the door because the cops were clearing out the room looking for the active shooter, I had them run around the building and come back in a back door.
Yes, I remember this. This.
So the first thing, what did the first cop do? He shot that person running through the hallway thinking it was going to be the bad guy. And lo and behold, it was an innocent, right? And then all of a sudden, of course, they go back to their other partners, and they're like, oh my gosh, be careful. Somehow they made it so there's 100 people at this party with only 8 volunteers. So just that simple stressor was enough to start to get them to think, because now instead of trying to cheat the system, they actually have to use their brain in the middle of a crazy guy that shoots really good trying to hit them, right? And of course, crazy guy was me because, I always like to lead in to Facebook. Oh yeah, I've shot like 150 cops. And people are like, oh my gosh. Needless to say, I didn't tell them that I was using lipstick rounds, but whatever.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a little different, but still, that's the whole point is it really does when somebody is shooting back at you with a gun that goes bang and yes, it stings. It isn't going to end your day, but the fact that you have to make those decisions and there's actual consequences if you don't, which is getting marked and then knowing that you've made a mistake, or now it's the physical representation that you died.
Yep.
You made the wrong choice, and either because of your poor choices, you died, or you made a poor choice and weren't paying attention, and now somebody else potentially lost their life. So I think that's the biggest thing. But the problem is that stuff's expensive. I mean, Mike, we have our own UTM guns and the ammunition for those things. It's expensive, and when you're talking about having guys go through there, I mean, it doesn't cost. It's not a paintball gun. I mean, these are actual firearms that have just been modified to be able to shoot these marking rounds, and it's extremely expensive. And so that's the problem is if we want to do training and train people so they make good decisions that save their lives and the lives of the innocent and also criminals, we have to invest in that. And any conversation about defunding the police goes to the complete opposite of what should be done. And that's the problem, is why it's just never going to work. Because to me, is the question really becomes is that when does that whole idea of talking to somebody and trying to play patty cake and talk nice, when does it go from that de-escalation, in air quotes, to officer survival? I mean, that's what we're talking about, is because at some point it changes, is it can't continue to go. And now you're in this de-escalation trying to get it to that point, and now it's gone from just a presence or verbal commands to now going instantly when you add in drugs and alcohol and being under the influence. Now it goes from that instantly to a lethal force encounter. And what do you do? And if you've never trained for it, you don't know how you're going to react until you do it.
Yep. And so I found my answer. Guess how many cops are in New York? Just take a random guess.
3,000?
36,000.
36,000?
Yep. Now let's do some real simple math here. Each one of them get paid roughly. Let's just say we'll round it off. They get anywhere from $41,000 to $44,000 just as a salary. So let's just say $50,000, right? It's times 36,000. That's their operating budget for the year. How much money's left over for training, I wonder?
Well, yeah. And so you said 36,000?
36,000 officers.
So we'll say 50,000 a year. So that's 1.8. That's a lot. My
with a little E on the 9.
Yeah, it says 1.8 with nine zeros. That's a lot of money. So that's what? That's 1.8. That's $1.8 billion, right? So that's
somebody. I'm sure somebody will check us online.
Whatever. It's a lot, but that's the point. This is paying their salaries, and so if you do that and you just say, "Hey, now we got to train those guys for X amount of time," and that number, if we train them and provide them with, a week's worth of training, you simply divide that by 52, and that's just what it's going to cost just to provide 1 week of training for all those people. Not to mention how long it would take to train 36,000 guys. Could you imagine that? Holy cow. Whew.
It's crazy. And that really puts it into perspective for you. So my brother's a cop, or was a cop with NYPD. So that's the reason why I picked on NYPD. And again, if you're not passionate about your job, which I guarantee you, out of those 36,000, you might find one or two that are like, it's just a job. I'm trying to bring home a check. I'm not trying to die tonight. So do you think that person is going to do their job 100%? No. I remember several nights on shift thinking, what am I doing? But listen, it happens, right? All these people, everybody that goes Subway, right? McDonald's, just think of your job. You ever have one of those days you're like, why am I here? It happens. Just they're not super cops. They don't grow them on trees from the super cape.
Yep, exactly. Well, I did some math on a regular calculator, not this stupid iPhone, and I was right. It's $1.8 billion.
Yeah, if you turn your iPhone sideways, it'll give you the number.
Oh, see, I learned something today. Look at that. Did you know, speaking of which, did you know? Nerds. I know. That's what you do. Did you know, here we are off in the weeds again. We were just talking about this is going to happen. Did you know that if you push the camera on your phone and you put it, and now the new version of the iPhone, and you just put it over one of those QR codes, it automatically reads it? Yeah,
you didn't know that?
No, I just learned that yesterday.
Random facts with Jay.
There you go. I'm here to provide. I am here to do a service for everyone to learn this kind of stuff. So, goodness. All right. Yeah. So I just think that's the discussion there. So thinking of that, I go, hey, okay. So now you got all of this stuff that has to do with the police, and that's what we've been talking about. But you and I, Mike, we trained plenty of not only in law enforcement, but also then a bunch of citizens that are arming themselves, and so it turns into another thing that. How does this apply to citizens, right? And that are going to be carrying firearms to protect themselves. And so there's other things that they have to consider that maybe nobody ever even talks about. I don't know. I hope they do. I know we used to talk about it pretty regularly. And the first thing is that when we're talking about that de-escalation in air quotes, is that what that translates to for a person who's just an armed person is that going to be the cessation of threat. And very simply, the cessation of threat is for anybody is that process of ending or being brought to an end. So that's really all that is that if there is a threat and to the point to where you can bring it down where it ends and there is no longer a threat, that's going to be kind of the citizen, civilian equivalent of, that de-escalation is you want to get it to where it ends. And once it ends, you don't do anything else. It's over, right? I mean, you just don't continue to use force. But you have
to try, right? But that's the hard part.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
When your adrenaline dumps and then you get, like you're saying, the threat is gone, you have to be able to turn it off. And that's extremely hard to do if you don't do it all the time.
Right. And that's what we were saying is that it's important that training, I think it's even if you're going to carry a gun, I think you need to seek out that training, and most people aren't going to do it. But, I think it's an important thing is because like you said, once the threat is done and that's over, whether they surrender or they ran off or or whatever you did made them unable to continue, is your level of force has to stop. And so you say, well, what are the elements of force for day-to-day people that are out on the street? And so I'll throw a couple of these out here that is called the elements of force. And these things have to exist in order for you. And again, the legal disclaimer, right? We're not attorneys. We're just giving you information. If you need to go talk to an attorney and get this. I'm just giving you some broad 35,000 foot view of some of the things that you need to consider in your mind. Is the elements of force. So these are the elements that should, I'm going to say should, so it gives us that out here instead of saying it must. These elements should exist to justify the use of deadly force. First of all is opportunity. And we're going to go way back, and you're going to remember us having to talk about these, Mike. It's probably been a while since you've talked about these things.
Long time.
Yeah. So the ability is, does the criminal attacker have the ability to carry out the act of causing great physical injury or your death? Right. So these are the things that have to exist. Okay. So here's an example. You say, well, what does that mean? So if you were a person in a wheelchair and that person tells you that they're going to get up and they're going to beat you to death, okay. But it's to point out the ability. The person in the wheelchair doesn't have the ability to get up, right? Unless you go to them and give them the opportunity to be able to grab you. So we have to think about that as who has the ability to be able to do that. So in this particular case, that person wouldn't have the ability to get up and beat you. You would have to be close enough to them in order for that to happen, right?
Right.
So the next one is opportunity. Okay. Does the opportunity exist for the attacker to do you great personal injury or cause your death? So let's give another example of this one. Examples are always my favorite. There's a criminal guy. He's in the back of the room. Let's say it's in a school, and he's in the back of the room, and he tells the teacher at the front that he's going to kill them with a knife. Okay. In between him and the back of the room is a bunch of desks. There's everything in between. So he's got to get around all those things to get close enough to that teacher in order to have the opportunity, right? So if the attacker is just standing at the back of the room in that particular case, the opportunity isn't there. Does that mean, do you agree with that, Mike?
Absolutely. Makes sense to me.
Okay. So then the next one is jeopardy, which is your life is in jeopardy because of the actions of the attacker. So an example of that would be they make a verbal threat towards you to somebody that's not there at the time, right? So the person is not in jeopardy until they're both in the same location. So if somebody says to you that on the phone or in a text message that I'm going to kill you, well, it doesn't really, you're not in jeopardy until you're both in the same area. So in the same room, whatever, right? So that's the jeopardy. And then finally is preclusion, which is one of the ones that people hear which is still crazy to me, is that there's still states out there that exist that have this, which is the duty to retreat. And I don't look it up. I don't live in a state that has a duty to retreat. I haven't lived in a state that has it, but I know there's some of them that are out there. So preclusion is have you eliminate all the reasonable lesser means of force. So you can't if you were able to eliminate, you can't use deadly force unless you've eliminated everything else. Hit them with a stick, throw a rock at them, trip them, whatever. If you haven't done all that stuff, and we're a discussion about the closet, right? You shot him, but you could have hit in the closet that's inside the closet that's under the bed or something, right? So duty to retreat is, a lot of them have it where you have a duty to retreat from a confrontation before you can legally use deadly force to defend yourself. And all other options have to be gone, and you had to have retreated to the last possible place you could go. So anyways, rambled on a little bit, but I thought it was important that everybody kind of knew, what those things were.
And if you ever want to see something extremely funny, go and look that up. Go and look up the DOJ's explanation of that. Go look up, there's a whole bunch of stuff online. It's amazing to me, all these color charts, and it's amazing what when these people dream up. So no wonder sometimes everyone is all confused about it. Just do me a favor, just Google it.
Yeah, and we'll put a link up to a lot of this stuff so you can see it. But that's the thing is, right, is that, and this is, I guess this goes back to the next side. It's a great thing that you brought that up, is we have talked, I don't know how many times we talked about the totality of the circumstances, right? And we bring that, I know we've brought it up at least once in every conversation that we've had on these podcasts, is about the totality of the situation, because that's what determines it. So at the very end of this thing, when you think about all the stuff, and is that at the end, if you do get involved in some sort of deadly force encounter is that there's going to be the jury is going to evaluate your split second decision, and they're going to have the luxury that you didn't have of determining the reasonableness of your action in relation to the colored charts, the flip charts, the PowerPoint presentations. And they're going to be able to do that all in the comfort of their jury, the jury room.
With no stress.
Exactly.
In the air conditioned. The only thing that they're missing is home dinner cooked meals, and that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe they can't read the newspaper because they're being sequestered or something like that. But still, I mean, so that's the thing you got to think about is that it's just, I don't know. And so when you talk about the totality of the circumstances, is these are some of the things that are important to all those stuff. And so I'm just going to run down the list because this is a pretty long list. And I was sitting here I was kind of quizzing myself to see how many of these I remembered. So I did them. I wrote them down first before I did, and I didn't do very good. So obviously I need to refresh so that's why I wrote them down, is to make sure to have them. So totality of the circumstances when faced with a critical defensive encounter, when you're dealing with somebody that's a criminal element or a threat like that, is that you have to then assess the whole entire situation, and then you're expected to respond appropriately. Okay. So here are some of the things that you should consider in the totality: is the age, the physical size of the person, the fitness of the person, the skill level of the person, right? Is that if I'm getting in an argument and in a fight with Floyd Mayweather or Mike Tyson.
Ooh, you better put a helmet on so he doesn't bite your ear.
Yeah. All right. But I mean, you get somebody that that is going to, or Brock Lesnar or something like that, those guys have a skill level that they can, their training allows them to be able to do stuff. Numbers. Well, is it 5 against 1? I mean, that makes a difference. The weapons, right? We talked about weapons in another podcast about what kind of weapons they have, and you should have the same level or greater. So whether they have a weapon or access to a weapon, okay, that should be a concern. And then injury or exhaustion, right? So is your attacker injured? Are they exhausted? Are you? I mean, those are things you got to think of. Position of advantage is who's got it. Do they have it or do you have it? And then special knowledge. So do they have some sort of training? Do you know anything about them as far as do they normally? So if because what do you think, Mike? There's probably an FBI statistic that you'll probably be able to look up while we're talking about this, but the majority of violent attacks that people are either injured or killed the majority is from somebody that they know.
I would probably, I don't know. That'd probably go 50-50, but I would maybe 60-40, but I agree to that. I'll look up.
Okay. It may not be like 80%, but I'm willing to bet it's a pretty large number. So do you have special knowledge about that person, right? So if you know and you're being attacked by somebody that then you would know whether they carry a gun all the time, they carry a knife. And so you have that special knowledge that you would have. And then the seriousness, does what they are doing warrant the amount of force you're using? So that goes back to a lot of that stuff that we're talking about. So is what they're doing warranted? Are we using an appropriate level of force? Right. So this still applies to people, not just police officers. And aggressiveness, determined or angry attacker is harder to defend against than an attacker whose heart just isn't in it. Right. I mean, that's true. If I'm just pissed off at you, but I'm not really want to do anything, I'm just going to, it reminds me of the Jim Carrey thing when he tries to go get his car in, what is it? Liar, Liar. Yeah. When he tries to go pick up his car from the impound lot and he tells him, I'm just going to sit here and you're going to, screw me over and this and that. And he said, oh, you've been here before. He's like, yeah. And what are you going to do about it? I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm just going to bend over and take it up the tailpipe. So that goes to, aggressiveness is your heart isn't really in it. And then intoxication or drug use. So obviously we just talked about that. If somebody's under the influence of drugs or alcohol, propensity for violence. If we know somebody and they're just a violent person all the time, they're maybe unstable because of their mental health. And then innocent people in the area. Are there people nearby who are in danger from the individuals of a critical encounter with somebody? So, I mean, if there's people in the area those should be determining those totalities of the situation. And then finally is your ability to aid or assist. So Are you going to, if you're attacked, are you going to be able to call for help, or are you just on your, on your own? So I think those things, when you look at it, Mike, those all encapsulate, that is what creates the totality of the situation, that you're having to process all of this stuff in this split second.
And let me throw in a curveball, your perception of that. So
Sure.
What I mean by that is when I watch someone's hands, I'm looking for certain things. So that's my perception of it, right? When my wife is strolling down the street with zero attention, she doesn't see any of that. So her perception is, well, oh my gosh, why did you move me into this position, or why did we do this? Well, like, well, that guy looked a little weird and I just didn't like it. So again, I'm inputting in more information into my brain. I'm seeing more things. And then she doesn't see it. She didn't understand. She didn't know. I'll give you another quick war story. We're walking down the airport, and this woman is just, you could tell she's irate. She's obviously had to deal with the airlines for about an hour or two. And my kid was walking on my left, and she was coming on my left. So I moved my son around to my other side. And, you could tell she was visibly upset. She was pissed, and she's getting ready to lash out at somebody. So no kidding, as soon as we got within 2-3 steps of something, she turns to me and goes, "What are you looking at?" Right? And I went, "Nothing, ma'am." So, and my kid was like, "How did you know? How did you see that?" So whether it's you've been around the block a couple of times, or I just perceived it, I already knew it was coming. I don't know if you want to call it perception. Maybe there's a better word that I don't know about, but that's the kind of stuff that we see. Now, to anyone else, like, let's say it would have gone physical. It would have looked like I was the aggressor, when in fact she really was. So at what point in time did somebody see the strike, right? What's the thing in sports, right? Whoever's a sports nuts, you always swing first, because the second guy that swings, he's the guy that's going to get the foul.
Sure. Well, and it goes, thinking of that is that, we were talking before about that de-escalation and how it's based on people's perception of the world, like you were saying, and their experiences, their life experiences. And maybe you grew up in a rough neighborhood versus somebody who didn't, or maybe your experience dealing with this type of person, you had a positive experience and somebody else had a negative one. So all those things, to me, the level of somebody's behavior, I'm going to be a little bit more tuned into what people do.
Right.
And, and so I'm going to see that stuff well before somebody else that isn't looking for it. Doesn't mean I'm, that I can't not be paying attention, but it goes into those color codes of awareness, which is a whole different, we don't have enough time to get into that, but maybe that's a good episode for a future episode, but is you have to be seeing these things ahead of time. And so if you've seen stuff, and this is what terrorists do, right? And there's a great book out there, which is is Unthinkable. And I'll put a link to this book, and it tells about what happens to people under these stressful situations and how they survived and why they survived. And it's crazy, but terrorists, if you remember back to 9/11 and, listener discretion is advised here, is that during 9/11 is when they were hijacking the planes, the way that the terrorists were able to get people to comply was they had box cutters. And if you're in a medical field, an EMT, any kind of first responder, seeing a heavily bleeding, maybe even an arterial bleed, seeing that may not shock you as much because you've been around it, you've been desensitized to it. But to the average person that doesn't see that, when they go up and they slit somebody's throat in front of you at the front of an airplane, and they use that as a form, and that's what terrorism is for, is that it just shuts you down. And so that's the whole thing, is that what is the level of what is going to bother you versus somebody else is really plays into that whole thing, is that it's not going to bother me as much as somebody else. So I'm going to be able to work my way through it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got your statistic from the FBI.
Oh, sweet. What is it?
It's a
Look at you go.
1-to-5 ratio.
1-to-5 ratio, meaning what?
Meaning, you knew every 5 persons knew their attack. what is it? How's it? 1 to 5? So you
1 in
5.
So 20%,
Right.
only 20%.
Yeah.
Oh, so 1 in 5, you knew the person that was involved in that.
Yeah. And now that's technically only domestic violence. So it says here that it was, they track it by, where's echo, includes a subset of violent victimizations that were committed by intimate partners or family members. Oh, here's F. Includes former spouses, boyfriends, or girlfriends. So yeah, technically the number goes up because now it's E and F. Yeah, these charts are awesomely easy to read. Yeah, we'd have to get back with that hard number, but I can send you this link and you guys can look it up. It's on page 4.
Yeah, do that, and we'll put it in the show notes. You just email it over to me, so I got it. But so the last thing that kind of goes into this whole thing about this totality of circumstance, obviously, is what is called disparity of force, and it's reasonable that a discrepancy in the age, gender, physical size, fitness, or skill level of individuals involved in the confrontation may or may not dictate the use of deadly force. So those things. If you're a young person versus an old person, like you saw that video, just sickened me. I'm sure you saw it, of the dude that's had 100 arrests and he just punched that 92.
He's a productive citizen of society. He's awesome, and we should totally let him go.
In New York, they should just let him go. And he punched that 92-year-old lady as he's walking by in the face, and she fell and hit her head on the hydrant.
Yep.
So I mean, age plays a difference, right? So if you're in a situation where you're older and they're younger, they're bigger, they're stronger, male versus female, I mean, those things all play a role into what that's the totality of the situation, whether or not it brings you up to where you're going to be able to use deadly force or not. So it's just kind of definitely some stuff that I think everybody needs to be thinking about and familiar with for sure. So, but I'm glad you were able to find that statistic. That's great. I was afraid we weren't going to have it.
It wasn't FBI, actually. It was BJS, so the Bureau of Justice Statistics. They have it on there.
Oh yeah, they have. I spent far too much time on that page.
Yeah, in case you can't ever fall asleep, just get on there.
Yeah, try to read all the fine print. That's for darn sure. And one of the interesting things is that I also in here, apparently, is it goes to when the jury goes to reasonableness. And I've always heard this, and it's a segue into a different conversation, is I've always heard, and I don't know haven't talked to any kind of prosecuting attorney about it, but I know anecdotally people will say, hey, if you reload your own ammo, they're able to, versus using, factory loaded personal defense rounds, is that they can show that you have an intent to do harm because of the way you loaded it or something. I'm sure you've heard that too, right? It is.
Yeah, I've heard that nonsense. And that's exactly what I think of it. It's nonsense. That actually, if you go back to Flagstaff, where that guy was walking and then this other guy's dogs got away, and the reason why they were able to convict him the first time was because he used a 10 millimeter instead of a 9 millimeter. And therefore that's why he was using a 10 millimeter, because it was more powerful. Because he didn't have a good lawyer, I guess, the first time. But that's one of the reasons why they did convict him the first time, which was
so he had a bigger caliber gun
overturned down the road. Yeah, but that's one of the factors.
So that's, and I don't know, it just gets into a thing about reloading. I know we've wanted to get into talking about the reloading stuff, and I just, that's what I don't know. I just didn't see that. I guess they'll find any angle to try to do all that stuff when versus reloading versus buying the factory stuff. Right. So just something for sure.
And again, I think it's a bunch of horse hooey. Again, why would you want to open that door? Just go use whatever the cops are using in your area, and they've already got that report on file. It's one less thing that you or your lawyer is going to have to do. It's going to save you money in the long run anyways, right? And again, because it depends on the DA, right? If he wants to burn you, they're going to do everything to burn you. If they want to make an example out of you, they're going to throw everything under the sun.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point is that all you got to do is go down to the police station, and they'll tell you what ammo they're using. And what the benefit to doing that and using what the police use in your area is that they have paid to have studies done, or the studies have been done, and that's what they used as the selection criteria for the ammunition that they use for their duty rounds. So you have all of this information that is available there that says, hey, if it's good enough for the police to use, then it should be good enough for you to use. And you have all of that data that has been paid for by somebody else as a help to your defense. And as soon as you go away from that, I get it as, we reload, Mike and I reload a lot of rounds. And so but that's used for practice. And so it isn't worth getting off the path to go and start tweaking formulas to have the most effect on just don't even do it. I mean, you're just opening yourself up to, in my opinion, opening yourself up to some problems.
If we weren't training people out at the range, we were shooting bulletproof glass, we were shooting windows, we were shooting gelatin. I mean, that's what we did. So
exactly.
Let someone else pay for it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I think too. So
those are your tax dollars at work.
Exactly. So I was thinking about, doing, I guess this went a little bit longer than I thought, and I don't want to, we got into this stuff. I think it was good stuff, and we were going to talk reloading, but I just, I think that's probably an episode in its own.
You shouldn't reload. It's very dangerous. Give me all your stuff.
Powder and primers, please.
Brass. It's all the brass you have. Give it to me now.
Yeah. Just give it up. Yeah. It's a waste of time. Yeah. But it's one of those funny things. And maybe that's what we'll do. We'll get, we've got a couple of episodes that, I don't remember when we talked about it, but we talked about, I guess it was this class.
Long distance shooting, I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. We did talk about it briefly in our long distance shooting class about all that stuff. But, I think, in the last episode, we talked about the CCW class. And so next episode, we're going to bring in our buddy Dave Laird from DCS, and we're going to talk about some stuff. We're going to talk about different stances, the benefits of it, how they came about. And then we're also going to talk into some of our favorite drills. And then I think, there I am saying again. Apparently, I don't listen to my own advice. But at any rate, so we'll get into some of that, and then I think that we should try to get Paul in here for a discussion on firearms in maybe the one after that, and then we can start maybe even with Paul we can talk reloading, because he's a reloading nut too.
That guy, you better block out like 6 hours of your day, because Paul is an encyclopedia of reloading. Yeah.
So is some of your action items as listeners is, please send us, if you have information, go and check out any of our training videos that we have in our library, or you can go to DCS, and we'll put up the link to Defensive Combat Solutions, so you can go check it out, and maybe come up with some questions you might have for David. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's a good dude, and he's got a lot of good info. If you have any questions on some of the drills, maybe throw out there the drills that you like. We'd like to, if you can get them to us ahead of time. If it's the El Presidente or the Bill drill or whatever, if you have one, throw it out there, send us an email at podcast@Latent Force, or put it in the comments, and we'd like to be able to talk about it during that. And then if you have any questions about guns, as far as, older models, what was good, what was bad, you've always wanted to know what the difference between, gun A and gun B is, we'll bring on our buddy Paul, and he'll be able to answer that question. And we won't even tell him ahead of time. That's what's going to amaze you. We'll know what the questions are, but we won't tell him, and he'll amaze you with his knowledge of,
he's going to be like, I remember that steel that they melted back in 74 to use for that 1911.
Yeah, I was there.
Yep.
Yeah. And well, let me see that serial number on that. Oh, yeah. I was at this bar and it was next to this restaurant that was in the town where that was made. And and the love of my life, she worked over at this flower shop. And yeah, that's what you're going to get. And,
but he's right.
So
that's the problem.
That's the scary thing. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, anyway, I think, that'd be good is if you guys have some questions for, the next episode, drills that you like. I'm going to post up the article. I wrote a blog post on stance and everything. I'll probably post it up here. It'll probably be here shortly before the next episode. You can read it, and if it brings up any questions that you want to ask about it, you want to call BS on anything, certainly put it in the comments. We'll try to. Big part is we want to interact with you guys. So if we have some comments or some questions, we want to get them answered. And then if you have anything on drills, if you have anything on guns, just shoot them our way. But other than that, Mike, you got anything you wanted to add before we get out of here?
No. Just remember that that's your perception and not ours. And we're right and you're wrong.
Exactly. On that note, that's all I got to say. Hey, thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Stay frosty.
And that'll be a wrap for this episode of the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action Podcast. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, or visit our website, www.latentforce.com, so you can get all the latest info from Latent Force. If you have any comments or questions on this episode, or if you have a suggestion for a future show, you can reach us by shooting an email to podcast@latentforce.com. On behalf of Mike Garza and myself, thank you for joining us. Be safe, and as always, stay in the fight.
Peace out.